like I said, this is going to be the second part, so hopefully you got good information on the first one and really how to gather that information. As we get started on this, I want to recap some of the stuff that we talked about last time that I think is very important as well. The first part is really understanding what's your long-term goal, okay? I think that most people are looking for something that's going to generate a long-term something or other for them. And I think really the only way that we can have time and have resources is if we own something, if we have a business or something that's going to generate that long term. And so if you're thinking about this from a business perspective, I think that your mentality and your ideas are a little bit different, and you learn this differently, and your thought process is a little bit different. So I want to talk a little bit really quickly and kind of breeze through again the difference between somebody who's building an organization, who's building a business, and somebody who's just out there gathering assets. And there's nothing wrong with either of them. Okay, just if you're thinking long term, what do you really want this thing to look like in 4, 5, 10, 20 years from now? Is this something that you want to forever generate income for you? Or is this something that you're just trying to earn some additional income for now? And I think the way that we treat things will help affect that long term. So somebody who wants to have this be a business long term for them, that's going to live off the residual income, that's going to do those things, is going to look at the asset organization or the organization builder versus just trying to gather assets. Now they're both great, and I think the beautiful part is we can do both of them. So just give you kind of an idea, I was looking through some numbers and I was running through some training up today about being able to gather assets. So an average financial professional, if they're in any company, would be trying to gather about $5 million in assets a year. That's kind of standard in the industry. But if you were to have $40,000 in assets under management, it would generate you about $500,000 a year in residual income. Okay, so that's somebody who's being an asset gatherer. Now, somebody who's building an organization is also going to look at building an agency and building a team and building long term. So that could generate another $1 million, $2 million, or $500,000, depending on what your income level is that you're trying to do. Plus, we're talking about renewals on insurance policies. So I don't know if you ended up with 2,500 policies throughout the course of your career. That's another $100,000 in residual income, or that's another $250,000 in residual income. Plus, we get paid off of the overrides of the agency, plus our personal production. So our industry is very easy to be able to create income from, both on the asset gathering side, but we also get to double up and build an agency as well. So I just want to make sure you have that in mind, that you're not thinking just about gathering assets, but also how do I teach a team of people to be able to do this and generate serious wealth into the future. Okay, internal consumption is another tremendous way that we're able to build our clientele, because if somebody's coming into the industry normally, they need help with their finances too. So through the recruiting process, we're going to gather a lot of clients that way. And some of them come in through the process just to learn a little bit more about what we do, get their finances in order, and maybe that's all that they really get out of it. Or maybe their whole goal is to pay off $5,000 or $10,000 in credit card debt. So maybe they'll do that. Whatever it might be, though, a lot of your policies, a lot of your clients are going to come through internal consumption of somebody who comes into the organization as well, which is why recruiting becomes so powerful, because it's part of the process of them coming into the industry. Is they obviously need to do some savings. They obviously need to get their stuff in order as well. So I think that's a great way to find clients. It's very easy to talk to somebody about that versus having to go out and be a salesman, if that makes sense. So I would say probably through our organization, we're 80 or 90%, probably closer to 80, maybe 90% of all of our clients are going to be through internal consumption. So that's an important thing to learn as well. And then also understanding, learning this from a method of wanting to be able to teach it to other people versus just learning it for yourself. So, and I think we listen differently. I think we take notes differently, depending on how we're trying to learn it as well. Okay. And so what we talked about last time, we got through the one-on-one, which was the first appointment we're sitting down with somebody. And a lot of times this is going to be in a very casual way of somebody just got started with us. We're going to go do some field training with them. We're generating some referrals. And so we've got to get good at understanding and edification and introducing the person who's going to be doing our training, how to do the presentation, kind of some of the things that we say and preparing them for the future. And then the idea of telling them how we're selling the FNA, that most companies are charging $1,500 or $2,000 to be able to do a financial needs analysis. We don't charge them, and we'll give them the exact same understanding of what they should be doing into the future, that it doesn't cost them all of those dollars. Then the first appointment is when we're turning into the client side. So let's say we asked them if they thought this might be a way for them to generate income. They said no, or maybe they just want to be a client side. So the first appointment is basically showing them the client side of getting a better rate of return, understanding compounding interest, taxes, those kinds of things. We'll gather the FNA from them, get all the information that we need, and then selling them out on the second appointment. And that's where we're going to start off today. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the research, the different types of companies that we can use, what we have access to on the client side, how we can really help families transition and put themselves within just maybe an hour or two, how we can change a lot of things for them from what they were doing into something that's actually going to be helpful for them into the future. A lot of times with dollars that's already going out anyway, to be able to actually make that turn into something versus them maybe just putting it into debt or something like that. Okay, how to analyze that with SMB, how to bring this information back so that myself or your field trainer can look at the information that you've collected. So Marlene just went out and got some information, and she's getting all of this stuff, and so I'm kind of helping her. So she gets information, and then we work on it, and then she gets more information, and then we work on it. And so you don't have to be good at everything up front. So I want to put you at ease on that you don't have to know everything. You don't have to have understanding of all the products and all the services and all the companies that we work with. That's just not realistic. It would take you too long to be able to do that. Whereas if you get good at just telling them who we are, what we do, gathering an FNA, you can come back and we can sit down and go through some of that stuff. And within a couple minutes, you sound like an expert. You can research 3, 4, or 5 companies. We can send you in the right direction, and you'll learn through that aspect of doing, versus we can talk about products and services all day, but if you don't start to realize which companies are best for which people, it takes you a lot longer because you don't really know. So when you come in with an FNA, that's really the best way for you to learn this industry, is having somebody's information that we need to figure out how to help this family. And we can sit down in a couple minutes and start sending you in the right direction on what to do for them, because we have so many products and services. Okay, and then a reminder for the second appointment, a cool way to kind of be able to keep your persistency or your ratio, your show ratio high for that second appointment. And then in the second appointment, when we come back to that family, we're going to go over the recap. What exactly is important to them? What does their financial needs analysis look like? And how we start to bridge those gaps and have some of those conversations as well. Okay. Oops. All right. Oops, sorry. All right. And then we're going to talk about, oops, sorry. Pause for a second. Okay, so then we're going to talk about the second appointment, the recap of who we are, what we do, how we do it, and then getting commitments from them as far as what they're actually going to start doing, what kind of savings they're going to put away, what action steps are we going to take, and then what does the paperwork and the referrals look like as far as gathering those things on the back end. Okay, so let's get into this. So the input on the FNA on MyWFG, so you do have to be licensed to have access to this, but it's a tremendous software that the company has developed to be able to take the information that we gather on our sheet, and I'll show you one of those here in a minute. You log into MyWFG, and literally everything that's on the sheet, you can plug into MyWFG. It's pretty much plug and play. And then what it does all the calculations for you. It'll calculate inflation. It'll calculate rate of return. It'll calculate what they're already doing to their savings and what changes they might need to make to be able to have that get them to wherever they want to go. So fantastic as far as some of the best stuff I've seen in the industry as far as being able to make it something that's fairly complex, very simple for them to understand, specific directions on how to get where it is that they're going. But there is a lot of um, options for you to kind of be able to plug in certain things. It doesn't say, hey, use this company and this product. It just tells you basically how much they need to be saving or what they need to be doing. And then our job is to understand which companies are going to be best for them and really how to put something into place for them. Okay. And so the research, a little bit of what we need to understand when we go over with the SMD. Here's some of the things that I want to help you with understanding as far as what we do and how we do it. And so when is term correct and when is permanent insurance correct? And so term insurance, most of you guys know, but it's going to be for a set amount of time. So maybe 10, 20, 30 years. Most common is 20 or 30 years term insurance, which is great because it's very low cost, very inexpensive. The downside being is when most people need it is usually when it's not there, right? Because if we're helping somebody who's 20, 30, 40 years old, and 30 years from there, they're going to be 40, 50, 60 years old, right? So by the time they actually need it, it's not there for them. But great while they're building assets and they don't have maybe the resources to be able to cover if something did happen for them. It's a very easy way to add $1 million or $500,000 to whatever they have going on in case they don't make it to whatever it is that they're trying to do. Okay, the perm side of that, the permanent side, is going to be a policy that's obviously going to last forever, right? So obviously it's going to be a little bit more expensive because they're guaranteed to be able to pay out. So regardless of how old they are, as long as they put money into the contract and it's been able to sustain itself, it's going to pay out those dollars. So how do we determine what to do? A lot of companies talk about, well, perm is the only way, or some say term is the only way. So what's right? And this is really going to boil down to a couple minute factors that I think we can all kind of talk about here without getting into a lot of detail. Now, term, obviously, because it's less expensive, is going to be good for people who don't give you a big dollar commitment, but need life insurance. So if they need $1 million in coverage, but you've only got a $100 commitment, you might have to look more on the term side than you would on the permanent side because they're just not going to have enough money to fund that thing and actually be able to put away. Another time where that might be good is if they just want insurance and they don't want the investment inside of the insurance. That can be great as well. I personally like a combination of the two. So what I personally do, what I see a lot of wealthy people do, is they combine the two. And here's where what we have is very, very unique in that our term policy has living benefits to it. So what that means is we could use that policy while we're alive. So if God forbid we got cancer, had a heart attack or a stroke or anything like that, we can use the living benefits out of that term policy, but the term policy goes away. So let's say in my case, I have a couple of them, but one of them is $1 million. So if I had a cancer or stroke tomorrow, I could pull out of that thing up to $1 million in cash right now while I'm alive. Now, obviously, that depends on severity of whatever's going on with them, but I'm just kind of giving you ideas here. So the reason why I like having that is more so for the living benefit because the chances are I'm going to live a long time and I'm going to be healthy. But if for some reason I'm not healthy, I would much rather pull that $1 million out of my term policy than pull $1 million out of my retirement dollars. That kind of makes sense? So now if we pair that with a permanent policy as well, then this is kind of insurance on my retirement or my supplemental retirement. Does that kind of make sense? So a lot of times we'll look at blending the two, especially because we can get the coverage they need at a lower cost because we can combine the two. So we can do the savings into the permanent side because there's lots of tax benefits to be able to do that. They don't have to pay. It can grow tax-free. It can come out tax-free. So it's a vehicle where they're not worried about taxes or a lot of times it's also for higher net worth people. It's a great way because it's all tax sheltered. So what that means is in a 401k or an IRA, if they got sued, if they got into a car accident or something like that, it's very easy for them to look up those assets in a bank account, in a 401k, in a 403b, in a 457. So what they do is they go, oh, Mr. Johnson got into a car accident. Is it worth pursuing on this lawsuit? Oh, he's got a couple $100,000 in his 401k. I think we should take this case. Whereas if that's in a insurance policy, they can't see what's in it. So it looks like you have no assets. You could have millions of dollars in there, but nobody would ever know about it because it's not asset searchable. It's also great for families who are possibly looking at having or have kids or might be looking for grants or those kinds of things to be able to help their kids go to school or FAFSA or whatever it might be, because on the form, there's literally a line that says do not include life insurance assets here, but all the other assets they have to list. So if they have $1 million sitting in a 401k, they have to list that, and now they can't get the aid that they need for their kid. And you go, well, why would a millionaire need aid for their kid, right? That gets into a whole nother topic, but it allows them the freedom to be able to do that. It's also great because they don't have pre-59, they can use it pre-59 and a half. Again, we talked about the taxable consequences, but there's a lot of great reasons why they might use that. And I don't know if we necessarily want to go completely into that today, but I do like the combination of having both, and I do both personally. So that way I have my supplementing my retirement, but then also having my life insurance in case something was to happen. I'd much rather that go away and keep my permanent policy. Okay. Emergency fund and helping them make sure that that's set up. So that's something else we're going to talk to them about, making sure that they have 3 to 6 months set aside. And this is important on both sides. It's important for you as the agent, and it's extremely important for them as the client. Because if they have no emergency fund, what happens when COVID happens and they're out of work for a couple of weeks? For some reason, and you guys can kind of probably relate with this, savings is usually one of the first things to go off the list, right? We would keep Netflix, but we would stop the savings for a month or two. It's just kind of how it goes. That's human nature. So if you understand the power of them having the emergency fund, then they're not stressed about what we're putting away long term, and they can weather the storm of 3, 4, 5, 6 months or a year of stuff going on, losing a job. So your persistency ratio, your clientele will stay on the books long term because you're putting that emergency plan in place for them. And anybody that you know that has a big emergency fund, they're just not stressed, right? And these are great clients to be able to work with and to have, because they're not worried every other week, depending on what's going on with work or how many hours they have or that kind of stuff. So let's make sure we're doing a good job helping them set up their emergency fund as well. 401k versus IUL. I think this is a great topic to talk about as well. So why would we use a 401k or an IUL? So a great book, I highly recommend it, is called The Power of Zero. So The Power of Zero talks about how to be able to, in retirement, basically not have to pay any taxes if it's structured correctly. So as you guys know, if you pull out if you take a certain amount of income, you don't have to pay taxes. So if you keep it under that dollar amount, let's call it $20,000 right now. If you're pulling under $20,000 from a retirement vehicle that is pre-tax, like a 401k, IRA, 457, when you're pulling that money out, if it hits a certain threshold, you now have to pay taxes on all of it. Okay? So if we can structure it to where they also have money in an IUL or something that's tax-free, they can then increase and get the amount of income they need and not have to pay taxes on the whole thing. The other challenge that happens is when they have to start paying taxes, it hurts their Social Security. It hurts a lot of other issues where they may have to pay up to 85% of the taxes on their Social Security if these things aren't structured properly. And that's a kind of an in-depth conversation, not really where I want to go today. But let's talk about comparing a 401k and an IRA. So I'm going to see if I can share a whiteboard here. It's not really going to let me do that. Okay, so we're going to have to kind of talk about this fundamentally, and I apologize because the numbers might get kind of convoluted. So what I want you to do is I want you to draw a line in the middle of your page, okay? On the left side, we're going to write $1 million. You can just write it out 1,000,000, okay? And then on the right-hand side, we're going to have the same $1 million. On the left, we're going to be talking about an IRA or a 401k. And on the right, we're going to be talking about an IUL. And understand these are quivers for your arrow, right? Now it doesn't mean you use them all the time. I don't go out and like pull somebody off the street and go, hey, let me tell you why a 401k sucks and you should use that. I'm not saying that, okay? I just want you to have this in case somebody asks you. You need to have these resources available, but I don't go out and teach everybody this unless they ask, because you might create questions that they don't even have, okay? I just want you to understand why this could be important. Okay, so if we have $1 million in an IRA, what that means is we're gonna have to pay at least 20 to 30% in taxes in that, okay? So we're gonna pay $200,000 to $300,000 in taxes, okay? So that's just what we have to pay, right? So, and that's assuming that taxes don't go up. So we just spent another $6 trillion funding our economy because of what just happened with COVID and all that other stuff. How's our healthcare doing? Not very good. How's our Social Security doing? Not very good. So the likelihood of us increasing our taxable consequences is very high. But let's just say it's 20 or 30%, okay? So that's the IRA or 401k because we didn't pay the taxes up front. Now on the other side with an IUL, we're gonna obviously pay some costs of insurance, but let's say it's a $500,000 policy. So you can write $500,000 below that. Okay, and that's gonna be our policy value. That's the amount of permanent insurance that we got. Okay, now let's say we had to pay $100 a month for 30 years on that policy. So $100 a month, 100 times 12 times, sorry, I'm pulling out my calculator right now. Okay, so 100 times 12 times 30. 100 times 12 times 30. So you should have got $36,000. Okay, let's say it was $200 a month for cost of insurance. That would be $64,000. Okay, so then would we rather pay $64,000 for life insurance, or would we rather pay $200,000 or $300,000 in taxes? Pretty easy to ask a client the difference on that, because what do we get for the $200,000 to $300,000 that we pay in taxes? Like, what do we get? What's the benefit for that? If I'm going to pay something, if I'm going to give money to somebody, I would like something in return. So what do we get for that? We don't get anything. It just allowed us to delay it for a while. We're on the other side, that $64,000, if it was a very expensive policy, maybe I wasn't very healthy or I started very late, something like that, what do I get for that? I'm going to leave $500,000 to my family. So at least I got something out of it. So that equation makes it pretty simple for somebody to understand the difference between 401k and IRA. Now, am I saying they should never contribute to a 401k? I'm not saying that at all. It's a great vehicle. If you're getting a match and they're putting free money in there, absolutely we want to do it. So the order of taxable stuff, number one, if we can do free money, that's always the best bet. Second is going to be tax free, and then it's going to be tax later and then taxable. So the challenge being is if we're not getting a match in our 401k, we automatically jump from free money down to tax later, and we're skipping the tax-free box. Does that make sense? So don't contribute more than what they're going to match, and if they're not matching, maybe we should look at putting into some tax-free areas. So I think that's very important to understand as we're moving forward as well. And that's something you can do with a life license. You can help them start contributing those assets to the future on top of the other benefits that you get of having it indexed. They don't have to worry about the market taking. You can still get rates of return as well. So after that, we also have some trans alpha and some trans one platforms. And so what those are is those are going to be managed accounts where basically it's a money market account. They can assign it however they want. It could be in an IRA, it could be in a Roth, it could just be in a money market account. However they want those taxable things, they can do all those different ones as well. Trans alpha is not going to be managed. It's managed, but it's not actively managed. So you only need $10 to start one of those. It's a betterment account. If you've ever heard of them, I recommend everybody have one of these because then you can talk about it to your clients. Put $10 in it if that's all you want to do. But at least that way you can talk about it without having to actually like have the licenses and all that stuff for it as well. Then trans one, they've got to have $20,000 to get into that. But what that does is that allows it to actually be active money managed. So for people who have more money, they can put it into that. Traditionally, to do something like that, you'd have to have a couple $100,000 to do it, but because we do so much volume, they allow us down to $20,000 that they can do something like that. And they can access it every day. They can create other accounts. It's a fantastic platform for them to be able to use. My account did like 22% from the beginning of the year. It's kind of crazy. And I had no idea. I just kind of left it alone, forgot about it because I thought the world was ending, right? Debt solutions. We can also help them with debt solutions. I think this is a great, when you understand how some of this works as well, I think it can be a great platform for them. Now, talking about debt snowball, helping them pay that off faster, because a lot of people get stuck here where, and I've seen it so many times where they'll like get some extra pay, so then they pay off their credit card, but then they didn't calculate the other expenses they were going to have in the next couple months. So then they run short the next couple months. So then they use the credit card to compensate the difference. And then it's like this constant cycle that they'll never get out of this debt. The numbers that they ran is like 80 some odd percent keep the same debt that they've had their entire life. So what we can do is we can help restructure that. And maybe if they're already behind on stuff or they have a lot of debt, we can help reduce that. There are some issues as far as hitting their credit score if we need to go to the extreme. But I think knowing that we can get them out in 3 or 4 years is way more effective. And so some of the programs that we have, just kind of run through it really quick, is they'll take 65% of that asset, or that asset gets reduced to 65%. So let's say they had $100,000 in debt that's unsecured, not a home or anything like that, like credit cards, medical bills, maybe an old car or something like that. They'll reduce it down to 65%. And then allow them to pay that off over the 3 or 4 next years without any interest. So generally, if they were already paying on that, they might be paying out, I've seen a couple $1,000s a month that they're paying in just interest to maintain these things. Well, if we can cut that down, put a plan for them to actually pay it off in 3 or 4 years, but also reduce the amount that they're having to pay on it every month, well, now that's maybe $1,000 or so that we can free up a month for them to actually start putting into their savings, because it's 0% interest. So there's really no benefit in them paying it off early if they can start getting interest on the money that they're saving. If we can get a 4, 5, 6, 8% rate of return on that money, instead of it going in there 0%, now it's getting some growth. We can start that savings that they've been meaning to do but haven't been able to do because of their debt. Wills and trusts, extremely important as well. Very, very different. So if you don't know the difference, a will is more like power of attorney. It allows people to get into bank accounts, that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really control assets. The trust is really more meant for transferring assets without probate. We'll get into more detail as far as that goes, but I just want you to have an understanding of some of the things that you can do as far as helping them set up stuff. We do stuff for businesses, so if we need to set up 401ks, those are super easy. You can do them with a life license. You just find a company. Maybe they've got 100 employees and they have an old 401k and they'd like to switch, or maybe they don't have a 401k yet. We literally call the Transamerica guys, gather some information, they fly in, they do all the work, and we get the residual income from it. So it's really awesome platform for us to be able to do that. Don't be afraid. Like, there's no fish too big. There's nothing that you guys can't tackle through our platform. So don't ever be afraid to talk to somebody like that. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea on what we can do to help families. And we'll talk about the second appointment reminder call as well. So the second appointment, this is exactly how it's going to go. So now that we've done some finding out of what we can do to help this family, now we're coming back in and we're going to go back to their home. They're going to come back to their office, or right now we're doing it via Zoom. And we're going to recap what we found in the FNA and how to help them move forward. Okay. So this is an FNA that I took. It's kind of the one we talked about last week. This is what it looks like when I'm done with it. Okay, so as you can see, we talked about all the 6 different areas that we help them. And so I'll recap on this. The first thing I asked them, and I'm like, okay, last time we got together, the things that were most important to you was, and then whatever it was that was important to them, whether it was cash flow and understanding where their money is going, or maybe making more money, maybe it's debt management, maybe it's emergency fund, proper protection, asset accumulation, or estate preservation. For them, The things that were most important to them was retirement. They felt like they were way far behind. They're in their 40s. They hadn't really started. They make good money, but they didn't really know what to do with it. They already had $80,000 in their emergency fund, so that wasn't that important to them. And then they wanted a will and trust because this particular couple, they were not married, but they had kids together. They had lived together forever. They weren't planning on getting remarried, but she was worried because he's the breadwinner. She stays at home, that if anything happened to him, the assets then go to the kids. And there's just this whole crazy loop if there's not a trust in place on who takes care of all of that stuff, since they're not legally married. Still important to do even if they're legally married, just to make sure all that stuff is tied up. Okay, so as you can see on the right hand side, we already had a conversation about all of their assets, what they wanted to do, and so I just kind of recap this with them. And I'll kind of pull it out and say, hey, did you guys come up with any other expenses that you had, or maybe any other income that came in? Do you feel this is pretty accurate? They'll usually confirm it, and then we'll kind of move on. So let's see, I keep touching the wrong one. Okay, so I'm going to re-get the commitments from the original FNA, like I just said. So it's still important for you to do the retirement. And then I'm going to pull out the actual financial needs analysis that we put together that the computer creates. So I'm going to show that to you. And this is what I'm doing through that process. I just wanted to give you the bullet notes so you can hear me do it. Confirming referrals, that they're going to give me referrals, that, we put this together at no cost for them. So they're going to be sending referrals. That's something that's very important. This will also help your persistency, them staying clients. If they're referring people, they're going to stay clients as well. Confirm their priorities. Make sure you're talking about what's important to them. I see so many times where they're like, oh yeah, I want retirement and I want a will. And then we come back and we're like, okay, well, we need to do life insurance. And like, no, like, talk about what's important to them. If they have $80,000 in debt and they don't care, like, then help them with whatever it is that they want to do. It's not worth losing the client if it's something that they don't necessarily care about. Work on what's a priority for them. You'll build trust, and sometimes they'll allow you to work in those other areas if it's important to them. Okay, so make sure you do that. Confirm their discretionary income. Make sure all this stuff is accurate, right? Because we've built up an idea of what we want to, how we're going to start introducing these things. So I need to make sure that the numbers that we have are going to be accurate before I introduce it. Because if I introduce it and they go, oh, no, we can't do $1,000 a month. We're doing $1,500 a month. They go, oh, well, my calculations are all off now. Does that make sense? So we want to reconfirm these things as we're going through it. Their savings commitments, how much life insurance they want, and then we're going to transition into the application right after that. And I'm going to show you how I do that as well. And a great question there is just, do you have your ID on you? And that transition, that's my signal that I'm going into actually starting to put the paperwork in to help do the application for those things, okay? So this is exactly, I'm just going to run through it as if you were a client, you're sitting in front of me. Obviously, the questions aren't going to be quite the same, but so you get a good understanding, okay? So we get back together. Obviously, we're going to do some rapport, talk about the kids, whatever was going on in their life. Excuse me. And then we're going to jump into it, okay? So here's kind of the photo album of that. So this is what it prints out, okay? So it has their name on it, our address, all of those things. Obviously, would be your name if you ran the illustration. And this is just some additional information for them. I confirmed their birthdays. So as you can see, they're 45 and 43. So they felt like they were kind of late to the game. And it stopped again. So they felt like they were kind of late to the game and really wanted to be able to catch up to be able to get on track for their retirement because they were definitely behind. Okay. Let's see. So, sorry, let me take a screen for time. Okay. Got their kids' birthdays on there. This is some goals that they had into the future. So I kind of recap with that. And then here's the 6 pieces. And like I said, I'll re-ask on this. And that's exactly how I say it. So last time we got together, out of these 6 things that we help with, cash flow, increasing income, she was kind of on the fence. She thought about maybe doing some work with us because the kids are getting older. She doesn't have stuff to do during the day. So she thought maybe she come do so might want to earn some additional income. Debt wasn't that important to you. Emergency fund, you guys are doing pretty good there. Crop protection, you guys felt like you didn't have enough life insurance. So we'll talk about that. Asset accumulation, you want to start putting money into retirement. And then, of course, doing the will and trust. Is that still accurate? Yes, that's what we want to do. And I would normally circle those so I know exactly what we're talking about. And it's kind of a confirmation for them. Okay, so the first page is going to be their income. And so as you can see here, they've got some nice discretionary income. They've got about $3,000 a month. This was funny because it was kind of a point of contention for the two of them. They're like, where does all of that go? And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, oh, it goes to Cafe Rio. Right? And so she's like, oh yeah, it might, huh? And so like they have this whole battle of her spending too much money on Cafe Rio for the kids and stuff. So kind of funny. I just let them kind of banter and play around with that. And I go, okay, do you feel like this is pretty accurate? You have about $2,800 a month in discretionary income. They go, yeah, but I don't know. Like obviously we're using it for stuff because it's not just going into savings. So I was like, okay, so you still feel about $750 a month that you'd like to do as far as savings on a monthly basis goes. Yep. So that's why I wrote 750 there, kind of underlined it. So I just reconfirmed, I just got that so if you want to be a consultant instead of a salesperson, this is the process, right? I just reconfirmed them on how much they want to save. I'm not like trying to beg them to save or do it. Does that make sense? So like this process is so simple if you're taking a consultant aspect to it and actually being able to put these assets or whatever it is that they're trying to do, put these things into place for them. So yes, we'd like to do $750 a month. I also, later on, I'll ask them how they want to do that, if they want to do that specifically into his or into both. This is a cool page too. It talks about where a lot of their assets are going. As you can see, food is pretty high. They had a rental house, so that kind of looked a little bit bigger too as far as the mortgage goes. But as you can tell, a lot of it was going into food. That was for 4 of them, so they had a couple kids. You guys know how that goes, especially if you're going out to eat and doing that kind of stuff. So I felt that was pretty accurate. They did as well. And then we talked about the life insurance. If you guys remember last time for Daniel, we confirmed that he needed about $150,000 or 1.5 million. I apologize. He needed about $1.5 million in life insurance. And so that's exactly pretty much what we came up with here as well. So that was a pretty good spot. He probably could have gone to 2 million because he had a good income, but he had some health. He chews. His health is good, but he chews. So that puts him into tobacco rating. So it kind of made it hard to get him term insurance and permanent insurance. And their main priority was the saving towards retirement dollars. So we ended up going just perm, not doing any term because of the health concerns there. But we did a $1.5 million for his permanent insurance as far as that goes. And then for her, right about what she was expecting, about $750,000, because she's not a breadwinner, but obviously she's taking care of the kids. So if anything was to happen to her, he would need somebody to come in and help with a lot of those things because he works a ton of hours. He's in construction, so he doesn't get much time off. He wouldn't be able to handle a lot of those things as well. I personally think it's really important. I've seen a lot of cases where husband thinks that he needs it, wife doesn't, and then we ended up putting something in place anyway, and something happens to the wife, and they're so thankful that we did. So I think that's pretty important to do as well. Okay, so here we're talking about their emergency fund. And so their main goal, really what they wanted was, I built this specifically for them. I thought they probably could have had a little bit more liquid, but they wanted to keep about $20,000 pretty liquid, and then maybe do something with the other $60,000+. And so what we ended up doing was we put it into the Trans 1, which they've been getting growth on that now. Even though the market's been crazy, it's been up, so that thing's been growing. So instead of their emergency fund just sitting in the bank, getting no interest, we'll keep some there that they have enough that they have access to, but maybe we can put the other $60,000, $70,000 into something that's going to get them some growth. And we won't go super aggressive. Maybe we'll get a 3 or 4% rate of return, but at least that way it's getting some growth while it's sitting there. They have the access to the immediate stuff that they need right now, and then the stuff that's growing a little bit, we still put in a money market account, but it was able to get some growth that they could also have access to it if they needed it pretty quickly. So they loved that idea as well. Now here we're talking about their retirement. And so their ultimate goal was they wanted to retire at 65. However, the commitment that they gave me for their savings wasn't quite there. So I ran 2 of these. This one at the top, if you can see, I made a box around age 72. So this was if they were to retire at age 72. They told me that they needed about $80,000 a year to be able to retire. And so what this does is this shows inflation, 2%. So by the time that they wanted to retire, they need about $140,000 a year as the equivalent to $80,000 now. So obviously the things of cost of things going up over time, they don't need just $80,000 in the future. They need $140,000 to keep the same lifestyle. Okay, and so then what this showed was they needed to be saving down at the bottom about $4,000 a month to be able to hit that goal because their anticipated retirement savings shortfall was almost 2.5 million. So this is helpful because it starts to put things into perspective sometimes. So I went kind of on the extreme side if they waited a long time to be able to retire. And then I also ran it at their ideal, which they wanted to retire at 65. So if you can see this number, so to retire 7 years earlier because of their age, they needed to save almost an extra $3,000 a month to cut off 7 years to get an extra 7 years in retirement. Because you got to think it's doing two things. It's one less year that they're contributing and one less year that they're taking out. So starting early is very, very important. And now I let them decide, okay, do you think we can do close to $7,000 a month, or do you think we're going to be closer to the $4,000 a month, or maybe somewhere in between? And I allow them to tell me what that goal is for them. Does that make sense? So maybe we don't end up at 72 or 65, but maybe we end up at 67 or 68. And at least that way we put it in the ledger when we're going to stop working. And then as he got additional bonuses or whatever it might be, we'll dump more money into this thing. Okay. And so they said they wanted to be somewhere in between. And so the commitments I got then this is the last page of that sheet. And so for me, this is just kind of the worksheet. Like, what are we going to implement? What do we need to do from here to be able to hit these goals? And so they had a $750 a month commitment. They were also going to dump in $25,000 a year because we were restructuring how they do some of their tax stuff. We don't do that. We're not tax consultants. We can't give advice on that stuff. But I could tell there was a lot of money there that if they worked with their CPA, they could have an extra $25,000 a year coming into the household because basically they were getting it back in their tax return. He also gets a $15,000 a year bonus on average. They said it was actually higher than that, but they could commit to about $15,000 of that bonus. So we added those up. And so I showed them kind of what we were going to be closer to the 72 retirement age. And then they also gave me additional dollars later once they kind of saw this. So that was the commitment. We dumped in right off the bat. So we started them both off. I submitted the application with $375 and $375 a month. Plus we were dumping, I think we dumped $50,000 into his the first year. Hers took a little bit longer, and then we dumped $20,000 into that right off the bat into their IULs. The reason why they wanted to use the IULs was, one, he owns the company. So if anything happened construction-wise, God forbid anything happened, he didn't want to have any lawsuits. He made too much money. Them combined, they made over $250,000 a year, so they couldn't use a Roth. They don't have access to a lot of the savings programs because they make too much money, but they can use one of the best ones anyway, which is the IUL, to be able to put that money into retirement years as well. They also didn't like the idea of the stock market, the ups and downs. They figured they were getting kind of close, so they just wanted steady Eddie, 7-8% rate of return, something that's not going to have huge highs or huge lows, but just make sure that we're going to get them there. So it was perfect fit as far as that goes, because they also needed the life insurance as well for the kids. So perfect fit as far as that goes. And then, like I said, we also did, we dropped $70,000 into the Trans Alpha or Trans One for them to grow on some of their money that was just sitting there as well. Then we also contacted, so there's two different ways that we can do a will and trust. We do a great one. It's pretty awesome. It's through NetLaw. We have another company that does it as well. I think not the Legacy MLM company. We have another Legacy one that does it as well. They're both very, very good. They're very practical. They're like $600 or $700. Very efficient for somebody who doesn't have a lot of craziness going on in their life, like multiple kids from different wives and houses and all of that stuff. Then they should probably go see a professional, estate planner. And we have some great referrals there for as well. We get about $500 for sending them that referral. If we go through the net law, we get about $250 for that referral as well. It takes about a month. They have a 30-day guarantee that if they don't like the platform or whatever, they can get their money back. But never had anybody do that. So even if you're not licensed, you can still make money in a lot of these areas. Same thing with the debt and helping them get out of some of that stuff. We get a couple $100 for helping set that up as well. And that's stuff that usually they'll do right away. The other stuff takes a little while. So kind of give you an idea as far as that goes. And then I think this is important as well, is I put their goal on there, because one thing I don't want to happen, and anytime I do anything like this, my thought process is always, you see, Your Honor, this is why I did this. And I think that if you take that approach, you'll be safe through your career, because obviously we have a license to protect, but not that you need to be concerned about it. Very rarely does anybody get in trouble if they're not purposefully doing something wrong. But I always want to have that thought process of, hey, it's been 20 years since we set this up. How come we didn't hit our goal? You told us that we would hit our goal if this is what we did. But if you put the goal on there, then that's clear, right? Like, our goal is we need to actually be saving $81,000 a year, but your commitment right now is $45,000. So that's going to get us there, but not till age 72. If we want to hit 65, we've really got to be saving $81,000 a year. And so that is kind of a CYA, but I think it's also important for them to see it and go, okay, we're doing a good job, but we kind of need to be working on this as well. And I think that that's important to have on there so they understand what they're supposed to be working towards. Okay. And transition to the application. So at that point, I'm going to go through that. I confirmed everything. You can tell I wrote down exactly what their commitments were, how much they were going to do. They said that they wanted to do 375 and 375. They confirmed on the life insurance already. So now I'm just going to transition right into writing that policy, because it took a little bit longer with us. I think we're probably going on about 30 minutes. Oh yeah, we're almost an hour. So that took way longer than it normally would have. It's probably about 15 minutes till we get to this point. And then I'm just going to transition into filling out the application and gathering their information. Now, if you're newer, another great way is we have a client information sheet. So if you're not that confident with the platform, it's easy. It says, I need their driver's license, I need their date of birth, I need their social, I need their account information, all of that stuff. You can bring that back and we can help you put that in. And I think that's actually a good idea if you're fairly new to not submit an application without somebody looking at it. I think you should definitely have your trainer or the SMD, myself, somebody look that over before you send it, because there's some small little things that you might miss that could cause headaches in the future. It's way easier to do it right the first time. So we can help with that. But gathering that sheet that has all the information on it, we can help you plug everything else in. So my transition there is very, very easy. I just go, okay, perfect. So we're going to get that stuff started. Do you have your ID on you? And they're going to start pulling out their ID, because anytime that we do any kind of financial transaction, generally they're going to need some form of identification, right? So this is their commitment. They're going to do it. So instead of saying, do you want to do that? Like, we already talked about all the things that they want to do. So they're giving us the signs that they want to do it. So I'm just not going to stop that process. I'm just going to say, okay, do you have your ID? Perfect. Let's start putting this information in. And I'm going to fill it out, or I'm going to fill out that piece of paper. Either way, maybe I didn't have internet or something happened with my computer, whatever it might be. Either way, have some of those papers on you so you can gather the information or plug it in.